Russia does not expect any breakthrough from the talks in Abu Dhabi, so the Kremlin is ready to sabotage them and pursue its war objectives by military means. This is the message coming from the Kremlin now, on the eve of a new round of talks between Ukraine and Russia on February 4 and 5 in Abu Dhabi. Moscow has stated that they will continue to insist on the surrender of Donbass. Moscow now rejects the security guarantees for Ukraine proposed by the United States and Europeans. In addition, Deputy Chairman of the Security Council of the Russian Federation, Dmitry Medvedev, suddenly stated that Russians are already close to victory, and after the war against Ukraine, Russia is ready for a global war against the West. And against this background, it's important to note one very important point. On Thursday, February 5th, the new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, which limited the number of nuclear warheads for the United States and Russia, expires. After that, there will be no binding restrictions left between the two largest nuclear powers. This means a new arms race era, and the Kremlin is not seeking to sign any new agreement. But in the meantime, Russia has also decided to cause trouble for the United States of America. After the worsening of the economic situation in Cuba, following the halt of oil supplies to the island from Venezuela at the request of the United States, Moscow has announced that it is ready to support Havana with money. And this is in addition to the fact that earlier Moscow forgave Cuba debts of more than $30 billion. My name is Pechiy. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave any comment under this episode. And if you want to support the work of our YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation. You can find the links and payment details in the description of this video. By the way, there's also a link to my Telegram channel, Pechiy News, in the description. Subscribe to it as well. Let's begin with the latest on the negotiations. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met with the negotiation team before new talks with the United States and Russia in Abu Dhabi on February 4th and 5th. He outlined the framework of the conversation and specific tasks for the team. The Ukrainian delegation will also have bilateral meetings with the American side. Ukraine is ready to take real steps to achieve a just and lasting peace. We believe that the bilateral security guarantees document with the United States is ready, and we expect further substantive work on documents regarding reconstruction and economic development. Well, let me remind you that these are supposed to be direct negotiations between the Ukrainian and Russian delegations. Meanwhile, the Kremlin has stated that they do not see any significant chances for a breakthrough during any peace negotiations. Vladimir Putin still insists that Ukraine surrender the entire territory of Donbass without a fight. He is only willing to freeze the front line in the Kherson and Zaporizhia regions and considers this a concession since he initially claimed 4 regions of Ukraine. Russia has also rejected security guarantees for Ukraine, which include the deployment of French and British troops in the country with American support. Their approval was announced by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. But Vladimir Putin's aide, Yuri Ushakov, stated that no one had coordinated these security guarantees with Russia, and in the end, the head of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, Sergei Lavrov, stated that the security guarantees for Ukraine are aimed at preserving, quote, the Russophobic regime in Kyiv and turning Ukraine into a springboard for creating threats to the Russian Federation. And here they bring out the deputy chairman of the Security Council of the Russian Federation and Russia's chief alcoholic Dmitry Medvedev, who began threatening with a global war. Usually I ignore such statements, but this is Dimka Medvedev. What can you expect from him? But not this time, and a bit later I'll explain why in the intelligence section. The United States of America believes that Vladimir Putin still aims to seize all of Ukraine, despite his assurances about wanting to make peace. According to them, after the war against Ukraine, he intends to focus on the European republics of Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, which were previously part of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics along with Ukraine. And now, Medvedev recently stated that Russia's war against Ukraine is close to ending. At the same time, it is absolutely clear that the fact of a military victory is very important, and it is already becoming apparent by a number of indicators. Russia's goals have remained unchanged since they were announced by President Vladimir Putin. At the same time, Medvedev pointed out the high risk that Russia may have to fight the West. A global conflict sadly remains possible. I think the risk is very high and not going down. The countries of the European Union are sticking to their line, which is to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia. Sooner or later, this will all end very sadly for them. But Dimka Medvedev was brought out into the arena for a reason, specifically to scare the West, and not just against the backdrop of the negotiations in Abu Dhabi. The thing is, on February 5, the new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, which limited the number of nuclear warheads for the United States and Russia, expires. The end of new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty effectively puts a period to more than 50 years of nuclear agreements between Moscow and Washington. It covers everything from the first Cold War agreements to post-Soviet treaties. In fact, this means that a new, completely uncontrolled nuclear arms race is beginning. Earlier, the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin tried to be cunning and suggested not signing a new agreement, but, as he says, voluntarily observing the restrictions. For another year, he said, let's have gentlemen's agreements, let's just agree verbally that we will voluntarily observe these agreements, but without resuming inspections, which the Russians of course refuse. Such a proposal is rather symbolic. President Donald Trump said he wants a new agreement that includes China, but Washington has yet to take concrete steps. At the same time, Trump ordered the Pentagon to resume nuclear testing, as he put it, on equal terms with Russia and China. And here one might wonder, why did Russia use this Oreshnik missile, which carries a nuclear warhead twice, to intimidate the West before the treaty expires? In addition, Russia decided to spite the Americans right at their doorstep after the economic situation in Cuba worsened following the halt of oil supplies from Venezuela to the island at the request of the United States. Moscow announced that it is ready to support Cuba's communist regime with money. This was stated by Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Lavrov emphasized that Russia insists on the inadmissibility of Washington's actions towards Cuba, including the blockade of oil supplies to the island. This threatens a serious decline in the country's economic and humanitarian situation. A firm readiness was expressed to continue providing Cuba with the necessary political and material support. And here, a big hello to Russians, especially to that group of unwashed Russians. Let me remind you, in 2014, the president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, wrote off, that is, forgave Cuba's debt in the amount of more than $32 billion. And Russia continues to pump money into Cuba. While Russian guys are dying in Ukraine hoping to make some money from this war, Cuba had $32 billion forgiven and they keep pouring money in there. And finally, let me remind you that at the end of January, United States President Donald Trump actually signed an order that allows him to impose tariffs against any country supplying oil to Cuba. Trump's circle believes that Cuba's economy is on the verge of collapse. After the Cuban regime lost its vital patron in the person of the ousted head of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, and Washington cut off supplies of Venezuelan oil. But now Russia will try to save Cuba. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like if you want to support the channel's work. You already know that all the links and details are in the description for this video. I appreciate any support you can give. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.